but because we're changing the name to Your Pet's Life Coach. So welcome. I'm so glad you guys are here. I know we've always done this on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock, and we're going to continue to do that. But we used to call it Vets I Recommend. But very quickly, I started realizing how many healers that I have that I love to bring to you and talk about animals and everything that we can do to help them get through these crises that I believe that our pets are going through. And it's a whole nother subject that we can talk about at a later time. Sorry, my little kitty kit here is chewing on some wires, which isn't good. My cord wires, actually. I'm so sorry. Hang on 1 second, because my little kitten just pulled this out. There we go. So anyway, as I was saying, so we decided to just start calling it Your Pet's Life Coach, because that way everybody, because a couple of people I would reach out to were like, well, I'm not a vet, I'm not a vet. And then I started feeling bad. And then we thought about doing maybe one that was all vets and one that was healers and all of this stuff. But as this continues to grow and we get more and more followers, I'm realizing that really I just want to talk about what affects our animals. And we're going to do a lot of talking about the vet industry in and of itself and what's going on there. And I really want to grab more people to be part of what I call a movement, in that we need to stop what's happening with the veterinary community. And what's going on there is they're being taken over by large corporations. And if that continues to happen, the treatment for your animals is going to get worse and worse and worse. And so that's where I come in. I want to bring people to you to help you heal your pets in so many different ways that you can do yourself at home. So that's what started this thing. And then we started branching out a little bit. And now I picked all sorts of topics that cover your pets. And so tonight I'm very, very excited to talk about something that is almost going to affect every single person that has a pet, because almost always we find ourselves needing to go to the groomers, whether you have a dog or a cat. I will say that cats obviously don't need to be groomed as much as dogs do. And most cats don't even need to ever have a bath at all. So, but it still could affect you if you have to go in and get your cat's nails trimmed, or who knows, they end up with some fleas that you want to give them a flea bath for. But most people who own a dog will at some point in their life end up in a grooming shop. And even if you swear you're watching this and you're like, no, I will never bring my dog to a groomer, that means you may end up grooming your own dog. And so whether you're grooming your own dog or you are bringing your dog to a groomer, then I'm going to tell you that this is going to be a topic that you're going to want to listen to, because one of the things I talk a lot about, in fact, if you were a client of mine, a new client. So if you're an old client and you're watching this, don't worry. You could still come if you want, but I do orientations now for all new clients before I can let them come in as a client. And that takes us about an hour and a half to go through. And what we do is we go over all of the ins and outs of grooming, what to expect, what I expect from you as a pet parent, and what you should expect from your groomer. And so we do that. Like I said, it takes about an hour and a half for us to get through that conversation, because one of the things I start with every single time is what may shock a lot of people, is that grooming can be dangerous. It is not only dangerous for animals, it can be dangerous for the groomer as well. I always share the story of one of my groomers who, and this wasn't that long ago, she was trying to do some nail dremeling on a dog, and he donkey kicked her, if you can imagine that, into the ribs, and she fractured her rib, or he fractured her rib. And so when we talk tonight about how dangerous grooming can be, it is very dangerous for your groomer as well. Not just for situations like that, but in the long run, like our backs give out, our hands give out. Groomers have a high rate of carpal tunnel and back problems and dislocated or herniated discs, which I have right now. I have two of them. So it works both ways. But what you're here for is to make sure that your pets are safe. And so I started this off. If you had come onto the spas, you had heard me say, the groomer did it. The groomer did it. And I want to talk about that, because if we continue in this setting where we just keep blaming groomers, what we end up doing is taking our dog from groomer to groomer to groomer to groomer, or our cat from groomer to groomer to groomer to groomer, because the groomer did it, the groomer did it, the groomer did it, doesn't help your dog. And so, and it's really unfortunate because the blame game isn't just coming from a pet parent to a groomer. It often comes from the veterinarian blaming the groomer. And that a lot of times could be, I used to work for vets. I was a vet tech. Most of you know that. I was a vet tech for 12 years. And I worked for a veterinarian who loved nothing more than to tell clients that their groomer didn't pluck the ear hair and therefore they were a bad groomer. And then he would get those clients because they would be like, gasped, I can't believe she didn't pluck the ear hair and she doesn't care about my dog. And, and then they would end up being groomed at the back of the vet hospital that I worked for by our groomer. But the reality is, it's really something that I want to talk a lot about. Is I can't say no groomer, but I'm going to tell you, I have worked with, I don't even know how many groomers over the years, whether they were at the back of an animal hospital that I was working for, or my own groomers, or just groomers that I've met. And I have never, ever, with the exception of one, very, very long time ago, did I think that groomers just didn't care about your animals. So I want to start with that before we get too deep into this, because I truly, truly believe that 99.9% of groomers got into this because they absolutely love animals. Now, somewhere along the line, they may have lost that in the stress of the job. A lot of people, I can't tell you also how many times I get phone calls from people saying, I just talked to a girl the other day. She said she wanted to get out of the corporate world and she just wants to work with animals. And so there is a huge misconception. I'm so sorry, but Carl just can't help himself. But there is a huge misconception that working with animals is so less stress and easier. It's kind of the grass is always greener. And while I absolutely love the fact that when I'm having a horrible day, I can go and just sit with an animal. Most people know me. I love, love, love to bathe animals. I love doing therapeutic baths on animals. It's very therapeutic for me. But it can be a very, very stressful job. So it can be filled with a lot of barking dogs. It can be a lot of loud dryers are going, depending on how the groomer sets up their environment. If they're grooming in the same room that their clients are coming in, I don't know if you've seen places like that where that could be very stressful to have people coming in and out. If you're ever at, and not to call PetSmart and Petco out, but if you're ever at a PetSmart and Petco, I'm just going to call out at this, please don't stand at their windows and stare in at the animals. There's nothing more stressful than that, not just for the animals that are there, but also for the groomer. I mean, can you imagine working in a fishbowl? It's so stressful. And if you don't care about the groomer, then care about the dog or the cat, because when that groomer feels stressed, then so does the animal. So if I'm working on an animal and someone's staring at me and I feel like I'm being judged, then I'm going to have some stress, and then that stress gets passed on to your animals. So it's one of the biggest reasons why my grooming shop does not have grooming in the front. I just really don't want to stress out the animals or stress out the groomers. So it doesn't work well to do that. So let's talk. We're going to talk a little bit before I get into this a little bit deeper, because we're going to dive into the grooming world. If you are there and you're listening right now, I know I always do this at 4:00. So sometimes it's bad timing for people. But if you're there and you're a groomer, please, if you type in anything, say that you are a groomer, because I definitely want to hear your side and kind of just work together as groomers as to what's going on. If you are on here and this isn't really the topic that you thought you wanted to ask, don't worry about it. You can still, I'm always here on Wednesday nights for clients and people that have questions. So you can ask me anything. It doesn't have to be about grooming necessarily, but if you do have grooming questions, certainly go ahead and ask those, even if they're not about the safety. If you just have a question. In fact, little side note here, I am very, very much considering doing an online class for pet parents where they can come on and they can watch how to groom whatever breed they're working with, and we would do it on a live Zoom so you can kind of learn. So that's a little side note. So I could definitely answer any of those questions if you want, or any other questions if you want about your animals. That's why I'm here. But while we're waiting for people to come in and any questions to come on, I want to talk to you a little bit about the grooming industry and why be very, very, very careful about blaming your groomer. So other than the fact that veterinarians blame the groomers, and I think in a lot of ways it's either like the vet I used to work for, a way to grab clients, which I think is really horrible thing to do. But the other part of it is also to kind of protect themselves. So, and I'm not here to say that vets are bad. So you guys know I have so many veterinarians that I work with that I love and I have a lot of respect for. So I'm never ever here to bash on veterinarians, but in my experience, I have seen some of this happen. So I'll give you an example. If you have a dog who has these chronic ear infections, and I'm going to use ear infections a lot in this because I think it's the number one reason that groomers get blamed. In fact, there was a Judge Judy case not too long ago, and I felt so bad because, I wanted to jump through the screen so badly and protect this poor groomer. I don't know, there's something as I get older, more and more, I just have this feeling of wanting to protect groomers. I mentor a lot of groomers and they call me. And so I just wanted to jump through the screen and protect her from Judge Judy. And if Judge Judy's watching this, I'm really, really sorry, but you were wrong. You had it all wrong. But I understand the law. She wasn't able to defend herself. But what stunk about it was that Judge Judy had a Shih Tzu who I guess used to get chronic ear infections. And so she believed that, yeah, it was caused by water getting in the ear. And that was reinforced by her veterinarian who told her the same thing. And so lo and behold, this poor groomer got blamed on national TV by a judge for causing an ear infection in this poor little dog's ear. And so I'm going to use ear infections a lot because I think that's one of the number one things that groomers get blamed for. But if you have, when I'm talking about how sometimes vets use groomers as a cop out because they don't have an answer. And so they need to have an answer, right? Somebody just paid them a bunch of money to give them their expert opinion. And it can't keep being the same opinion over and over because we know, as we've all seen, especially if you're a groomer or even if you're a veterinarian watching this or anybody, what we see in our animals is chronic ear infections, right? You go to the vet prescribes antibiotics, some ear cleaner, some solution. Maybe they might suggest running an allergy test and changing the diet. It depends on how deep your vet wants to get into cause. But if you keep doing that over and over and over, and the results are not working, your dog keeps getting the ear infection. And then one time you go in there and you're frustrated with your veterinarian and you're like, look, you've had him on 6 different antibiotics. I've changed his food. I've done every single thing you've said. I've spent thousands of dollars here and my dog keeps getting ear infections. And my groomer told me that the dog has an ear infection. And as soon as you say the word groomer, what's going to happen is the vet's going to be like, well, I think your groomer is getting water in the ear. Because most people believe that. It's a really wrong way of thinking. So most people believe, yeah, the water in the ear, the groomer caused it. And so it's an easy cop out for the vet to use that. I once had a veterinarian tell a client of mine that her dog had an upper respiratory infection. And he did. But I told her it's probably kennel cough. And she said, no, the vet said it's not kennel cough. It's an upper respiratory infection. And I said, well, he's probably calling an upper respiratory infection because it sounds, which kennel cough is a respiratory infection. So it was interesting to me that he wouldn't use the word kennel cough. And I highly suspected that the reason he wouldn't use the word kennel cough, because I doubt that he actually ran a test to find out what kind of, or if it even was a bacterial infection. But he had vaccinated this dog for kennel cough so many times that he couldn't just now say, well, because her next response would have been, well, my dog's vaccinated for it. So it was much easier to call it upper respiratory infection. So my point to that is you have to be really, really careful. And not only that, but sometimes clients lie. Lie's a harsh word, I know, but I'm just going to say it. Or they believe it so much that they think it's true. They don't tell the truth a lot of times to, hi Lily, they don't tell the truth a lot of times to their veterinarians. So they go into the vet and they're like, I don't know, his ear was fine. He was totally fine yesterday. And now he's, scratching at his ear. So that may be sort of true, but what they didn't tell the vet maybe was that the ear had a little odor coming out of it, or maybe they didn't notice that the dog had an odor. So a lot of times that's why groomers end up getting blamed, because the whole truth isn't being conveyed, and truth isn't the right word, I'm sure, but the whole story of what is going on may have gone unnoticed by your group, by the owner, or they don't really want to say it because they want to find blame, right? If I can blame somebody for it, then it's not my fault. And people always think that anything that goes wrong with their children, their grandparents, or their animals falls on one of the caregivers in the house. And I'm here to tell you guys that sometimes, and a lot of times when it comes to our animals, nobody's at fault per se. A lot of the stuff that happens with our animals is determined before they were ever even born. So if you want to keep going and going and going and put fault on somebody, you can put fault on the great, 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 great grandparents. But sometimes the fault is nobody's fault. And that's a really hard thing for people to sit with, is that if it's not the groomer's fault, if it's not the vet's fault, if it's not the breeder's fault, if it's not the neighbor's fault, then it has to be my fault. But what if you took you out of it? What if you said, okay, well, it's nobody's fault. This just happened to be what happened. You'll live a much better life if you can learn to do that. But blaming your groomer over and over for another one that groomers get a lot of times. And don't worry, guys, if you're watching this, I'm going to talk about the stuff your groomer is responsible for, because there are times that your groomer is 100% responsible for the injuries and the things that happen to your dogs. But right in the beginning here, I want to talk a lot about what I don't want you to do is to blame your groomer and end up in another grooming shop and another grooming shop and another grooming shop and another vet hospital or whatever it is. I want you to be able to learn how to find out what it is. And if it's nobody's fault, how do we come up with the solutions? Because taking your animal from one grooming shop to another, to another, to another is very stressful. I cannot stress enough to you that when your animal bonds with somebody, that is not an easy thing for an animal to do. To bond with a total stranger in a different environment than they're used to. It's much easier for an animal to get used to people that come into their own environment. And, your sister comes over every Friday, that's fine. But if you keep taking your animal to all these different places, they have to rebond, learn the routines, learn the smells, learn the sounds, learn all of it. And that's not a good thing. And so that's why I want to talk to you about how you choose your groomers, what role you have in protecting your animals, because you do, believe it or not, as a pet parent, there's a lot you can do. Even though you're not there, there is so much you can do to protect your animals in a grooming shop to make sure that they're not getting hurt. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then, like I said, I'm not going to let the groomers off the hook, because there are some groomers. And the one thing I do want to stress before I do talk about groomers is that I don't think anything that groomers do, I told you, I think 99.9% of groomers are just in this because they love it. It's not a money-making business. You have to really, really love it to stick with it. But there is probably a percentage out there, a very small percentage of people who should never have been in this industry, and they're just doing it because they can't do anything else. But they're not out to hurt your animals on purpose, but sometimes they get lost in it, and that getting lost can actually cause your animals. So I'm going to give you guys some things to look for and to make sure that you know what questions to ask your groomers when you're going there. And that means groomers don't get a false sense of security. A lot of times, and this isn't also either to scare you, but the worst groomers that I have seen, and it's not to say they're all like this, because they are not. Please don't take anything I say as being all or nothing. But I hear this a lot where people say, well, I'm going to get him groomed at the vet hospital because then he's safe. The worst cases I have seen have been in the back of vet hospitals. So I guarantee you vets are not paying attention to whatever the groomer's doing. Most of the time, vets are completely oblivious to what the groomer's doing. The vet hospital that I work for, the groomer came in the back and the vet never even saw the groomer. So That is with everything. I also don't want you to get a false sense of security that when the mobile van pulls up in your backyard or your front yard or wherever it is, that because they're right in front of your house, somehow you are safe. Your pet is safe. Some of the worst cases I've heard have come out of mobile grooming. So you have to understand that no matter where the situation is, whether that is great for your pet. So don't listen to my neighbor takes my dog, her dog here, and she has a little chihuahua. I say this all the time. People ask all the time, where do you take your dog for grooming? Be really careful choosing a groomer based on the neighbor with the chihuahua took him there and he loves it, because chihuahuas don't need much of anything. And if her chihuahua is a 4-year-old chihuahua that gets along with everybody and has no problems, and you have a 17-year-old overweight dementia dog with heart problems who hates to be groomed and wants to bite the groomer, those are two different type of grooming styles. So you need to make sure that you find a groomer who has that ability to know the difference between working on a chihuahua that has no medical history, no problems, isn't old, isn't overweight, and a groomer that can deal with an animal who does have health problems and those kind of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So to make it easy for you, what isn't your groomer responsible for, right? So I touched a little bit about on ear infections. So I will right here promise you, like if I die and go to heaven and God says to me, you were wrong. You were absolutely wrong. Carrie, ear infections are caused by water in the ears. Then I'm going to quickly apologize and then hopefully learn from my mistakes. But I do not at all at this time believe that ear infections are caused by water in the ear. And there are a lot of veterinarians that back me up on that, or I back them up on, I don't know, probably I back them up because they have a higher degree than I do. So, but ear infections are not caused by water. I will take that to my grave with me. But what it can do is it can cause, a lot of times what happens is you bring your dog into the groomer and they already have an imbalance in the body, and they clean it out and they get a little water in there. And then, because that ear is now moist, that yeast goes up into the ear canal and leaves, I think it's the food, ear infections. Yeah. Well, yes and no, Lily. I mean, yes, mostly yes, that is it. It's really about gut imbalance. And so if the foods we're feeding are feeding the bad stuff in the gut versus the good stuff in the gut, yeah, absolutely, it causes ear infection. But why is it that you take your dog to the vet and you think the dog was fine, and then you pick him up and the next day he's scratching at his ear, he's doing all this kind of stuff? So there's a couple reasons why that can happen. If you have a dog who needs to have his ear hair plucked, which by the way, I don't recommend, I don't do it. I only will do it if somebody really, really insists on it. But if I start to see that this dog is getting constant ear infections, even with me plucking, I will stop. But when you pluck the ear canal, so the ear canal on a dog is kind of like an L-shaped sort of. I mean, it's hard for me to turn my hand that way, but it's kind of a little L-shaped. And if ear hair will come all the way down here, and the only part you're going to be able to see is this top part right here. So if you pull from here, the ear hair out, sometimes what's happening is there might be a little underlining ear infection right here, a little irritation, something's way down here in the canal. And then you go to pull that hair out. And believe me, I pulled hair out, I am not kidding you, out of a dog's ear that's been like this long. Give me 1 second because my husband just walked in the door. I always keep saying I need to do this at a different time because my dog likes to tell me when my husband's home. Ansel. So I've pulled the ear hair out, and it comes out, and this big long stretch of hair comes out. And this is kind of side note and also kind of funny. I always let the dogs smell it, and they love smelling their own ear hair. Like, oh my God, that came out of my ear. It's so gross. Well, this was before. I don't pluck ear hair anymore, but we pull this big long thing of hair coming out. What ends up happening is we've actually irritated what was maybe the beginning of an ear infection. And so now all of a sudden your dog starts itching and scratching and going crazy because we've irritated it. We've pulled all that ear hair out. So that's one reason why a lot of times people will tell their vet, oh, he was fine a couple of days ago, I took him to the groomer and now he's scratching or shaking his head. But it's not the groomer's fault, right? But the groomer gets blamed for it. I cannot tell you how many times groomers have paid for ear infections and just to, not upset somebody. I've even had to do it where I just go, okay, it's not worth fighting. So I just end up paying for it. But it can get really, it's one thing to just pay for it, but it's another thing to try to get somebody to understand what is the cause. Because if I just pay your vet bill and we just go on about our day, this dog goes the rest of his life having ear infection after ear infection after ear infection after groomer after groomer after groomer. Because now the client's angry, thinks that I caused an ear infection. So it doesn't do the dog any good. So it's not really a good plan to just find somebody to pay your vet bill. What would cause black, dark stuff between the toes? My dog has been licking his paws. Your thoughts? Is it scraping off the nail? Like if you took your finger around the nail, or do you mean like in the webbing part in here? In this part, or like around the nail bed? So tell me that, and then I can give you a little bit better answer of what I think it could be. So that's one reason why people think that, oh, the groomer caused the ear infection. It's also the reason why I don't pluck ear hair, because I did my own study a few years back, and I just wanted to know, I had all these dogs in the webbing part down in this part. Can you scrape it off, Lily, or is it just black? Because sometimes with age, they can get kind of like dark spots. So without seeing a picture, it's kind of hard for me to tell. And this may be gross for you, go smell it and let me know like what it smells like. But sometimes you can just get almost like dark spots. I don't know how old your dog is, but sometimes you can get that. But let me know if you can scrape it off. So anyway, so I did this study trying to find out if I have all these dogs that have chronic ear infections and I'm plucking their ear hair and they're still getting ear infections. And what happens if I stop plucking the ear hair? Will they still get ear infections? And the bottom line is dogs get ear infections, whether you pluck or don't pluck. That's why, just like Lily said, we believe it comes from diet. And I have a client right now who I'm just heartbroken that this is already happening, but she has a golden retriever who's 10 years old, and he's suffered from quite a few ear infections, enough so that when he shakes his head, he keeps rupturing one of his ears, and then he ends up with a hematoma, and then he has to go have surgery for the hematoma. And so she just got another golden retriever puppy, not even 8 months old, and has two of the worst ear infections I've ever seen. And I already know where we're going. And it's just awful. Yes, you can scrape it off. Age 4 Cocker Spaniel. I was washing his feet daily. Now I only wash with water. Yeah, only wash with water is a really good idea. Without getting a culture on it, I wouldn't know if it's bacteria. Sometimes if it has that Fritos smell, we can assume that it's yeast. But without getting an actual scraping on it, it's kind of hard to tell whether it would be a bacterial or did you say he's licking it? Oh yeah, he's licking his paws. I got to tell you guys, I know this isn't really the most holistic approach, but I use something for paw licking that has been unbelievably successful for me, and my clients are just so happy. I started doing consultations, and I would call them paw licking syndrome. Does your dog have paw licking syndrome? And I called it that because there's so many reasons why your dog could be licking his paws. I mean, the numbers, all the way up to a pulled muscle, nerve runs up into their neck from them pulling when you're walking them, to mange, to anxiety, to food allergies. There's a broken toenail, a broken toe, a cut on the bottom of the foot. There was even a case I had years ago. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this story just came to mind. I love this story. It's the cutest story, but also very sad. But when we talk about grooming being dangerous, this is one of those things. So I was grooming this. God, this was so many years ago. I can't believe I remembered this. But she's a little Maltese, so cute, and she was very wiggly, and I nicked the bottom of her pad. So just the pad part, I nicked it, and I'm not trying to minimize it. I nicked it a teeny tiny little bit. And she didn't even cry or yelp or do anything. I put her down on the ground and she licked it for a few minutes, and then she went about her business. And I'm a free run facility, so my dogs can run around wherever they want. So she went and laid down and did her thing or whatever. So a little bit later, I put her in this front room. It's a nurse. We call it the nursery. And it has a big giant window. And so when people come in, they can look in there. It has a bed and a TV and all this stuff. And so I put her in there just to keep her separate. And she was laying on the bed or whatever. And I don't even know, to this day, I don't really know why I thought this might happen. I have seen it happen in animals before, but I don't know why it occurred to me that she was going to do it. So before the owner saw his dog, I went up in front. Thanks, Lori. And I went up in front and I told the owner, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You know, I nicked the bottom of her paw, but I just kind of want you to peek in there in the window." And I had him hide behind a plant. And he looked in there and he could see her walking around totally fine, just walking around like nothing ever happened. And then I brought her out. She walked out on her own through the door. And as soon as she saw him, she put her paw up and she started licking it. And he said, if I didn't see that with my own two eyes, I would never have believed that my dog was fine. I cannot believe she just did that. And I said, yeah, every once in a while, they know how to get attention. And so anyway, the funny part of that story is that he called me a week later and he said, every time my wife comes in the door, she licks her paw every single time. Not for him anymore, because he's like, I didn't buy into it. But the wife, I guess, was like, oh, my baby, like us women do tend to be I shouldn't say us women, but we tend to do. And so for like a week at least, every time the mom walked in. So my point is, paw licking can be any number of reasons why. It can be something that they've been conditioned to do because somehow you didn't even know you did it. You didn't even know that your dog licked his paw one time and then you went over and pet him and looked at it and touched it and did all this stuff. And your dog might be thinking, every time I lick my paws, my mom pays attention to me. So sometimes it's psychological, even as much as just like your kids when they were little, you get on the phone and as soon as you got on the phone, they have a problem because they want the attention. So the same thing your animals can do. So paw licking can be, but anyway, back to one of my favorite solutions for paw licking. And it won't hurt your dog. It's not something I want you to do all the time. And you only want to try it for the 8 days that I'm asking, within 8 days that I'm asking you to try it. So there's a product on the market called lime and sulfur. And if your dog has a fungus, a bacteria, mange, foot mites, there is mange is not necessarily a foot mite, but there are some little foot mites that your dogs can get, Lily, which is what I'm talking about. So you can get it online. It's called lime and sulfur, and it's like $25, I think. And it smells horrible. So don't do it before you're having company over, like maybe like 3 days before company comes over, because it can get in the air and it smells like rotten eggs because it's sulfur. And just follow the directions on the back, and then just make sure that you dip your dog's feet in it. And then after they dip in it, you want to make sure that you have like a kennel available because you need it to dry on your dog's foot. And then you do that about every 3 days for 8 days. So you're going to do it 2, maybe 3 times. If you don't see any changes after the 3rd dip, then it's not your problem. Then there's something else going on. Once it dries, they can run around the house and it's not a problem. But when it's wet, it can stain. So you don't want to use it. But I highly recommend it. I have done it. I had a dog, a Yorkie, come in one time who it was awful. This poor dog, every time she would take the cone off, he was going to rip his foot off. He was just in excruciating. It was so bad for him. So try the lime and sulfur, Lily. If that doesn't work, you may want to start looking towards stuff like anxiety. If you're walking your dog you already had said there's black stuff there. So I'm suspecting that there is something there that's causing it. Hopefully it's not like a strong yeast or bacteria. And of course, when I have any kind of bacteria growing on a dog's body, whether it's between their feet, under their arms, in their ears, I'm always going to recommend giving stuff like goat's milk, raw goat's milk. And looking at probiotics. I highly recommend doing a lot of people. I just had a conversation with a woman today and she's been giving probiotics to her dog forever. And I know I'm getting a little off topic. Don't worry. We'll get back on topic because I have a lot of things that I can talk about in the grooming industry, but she has been giving the same probiotic for so long. And so I always tell people, picture this, this is totally different than the iodine. Absolutely different. So I would really, really try it and don't give up on it. At least do 3 dips on it. But most people have told me that they noticed a difference day one. I just had a corgi in the other day that we did. He could not believe the difference, and he's tried everything. So I think it's worth trying. But anyway, now I lost my train of thought because I do that a lot. But anyway, so what was I can't remember what I was saying. So uh, talking about we were talking about the pause. I'm so terrible about that. Okay, well, we'll talk a little bit more about the grooming industry, and I'm sure that'll come back to me in a second. So blaming your groomer is something we just don't want to do. So I'm going to give you guys goat's milk. Oh, making sure. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So when we were talking about the giving goat's milk to dogs, any dog that is having this kind of issue, and Lily, honestly, I would put the goat's milk all in between your dog's feet, because one thing I know for sure is that good bacteria can push out bad bacteria. We know that can happen in the gut. It can also help on the skin. So you could do the lime and sulfur dip, and then 2 days later do the goat milk on the feet. Or actually, I wouldn't do it 2 days later. I would wait till you get through that and then soak the feet in goat milk. So you do the 3 lime and sulfur dips, and then when those are done, do some goat milk soaks with the feet, and you'll be amazed. And let it be cold, because that brings down the inflammation. But good bacteria can get in and kill bad bacteria. So, but what I was going to say about goat's milk is that sometimes if you picture your dog's gut like a puzzle, right? And each puzzle, in order for that to be a beautiful picture, right? In order for it to be your Yosemite picture that you've been working on your dining room table for months, each little puzzle has to have something. And if you tried to put all of the puzzle pieces in the spots that were the same, right, it would be all cattywampus, which is a really old term I just used. I can't believe it. So you want to make sure each puzzle piece is filled in order to get that beautiful picture. And if you keep putting the same probiotic or puzzle piece in, it's not going to be right. So giving the same probiotic over and over, I don't care how good the probiotic is. I don't care who developed it. If you keep giving it over and over and over and over, all you could be doing is putting more and more of the same bacteria, but each bacteria has a job to do. And so you can end up pushing out some of those, or not allowing some of those good bacteria to grow, because you've pushed out all of it with one bacteria. So if you're giving a probiotic and you've been giving it for a long time and it's not working, you need to change. And you don't just change companies. Flip it over and go, this has lactobacillus in it, and I've been giving lactobacillus for a really long time, so let me try a different one. One of my favorite things to do is to run an animal biome test. It's pretty expensive, but well worth it, because you can run the animal biome test and it'll actually sit right in front of you on paper. You'll know exactly what bacteria your dog has and doesn't have, and how little he has of this and how little he has of that. So it's something I highly recommend doing. So I hope that helps, Lily. I really, really hope it helps. I really think you should try the lime and sulfur. But so let's talk a little bit more about I Give Gut Sense by Dr. Peter Dubois. Yeah, I love him. I love him. But again, if it's something that you've been giving for a long time, you want to check and see, what is it? What bacteria is in here? Because there's so many. And one thing science hasn't caught up to is what each one of those bacteria does. And so we're not really quite sure every single bacteria, what its role is, how important its role is. We know some, but we don't know all. So it's a good idea to change bacterias a lot. If you're gonna be using probiotics, you should be rotating them constantly. I would say about every month or so, you want to rotate and use a different bacteria. So I would probably have 3 or 4. Make sure they're different, because just because it's a different brand doesn't mean that it's different bacteria. So, and some may have a little bit of, and you might even want to stop for a week. Just stop and let the gut kind of do its own thing and see if it'll work itself out. And sometimes it will. If you just keep putting the same stuff in there, maybe if you just stop, everything will just kind of fall into place. So let's talk. So we talked about your groomer getting blamed for the ear infections, your groomer getting blamed for ear, like plucking in the ear hair, and I really, really like Julianne Lee's Adored Beast products. I get really good results from them. I love raw goat's milk. I love 4-Leaf Rover. I think is actually a good company. I really like it. Anything fermented is a really good way to get that into your dog's body. So there's a couple of them out there that I think are really good. Animal Biome actually makes a really great one. I love doing Animal Biome makes a FMT pill. So it's a fecal microbial transplant pill, and it's actually poop inside a capsule. That is a lot. So I don't want to say it's hardcore, but it is definitely a really great capsule that you can give your dogs. And I get really good results from that. Send me the link to Animal Biome Company. I couldn't find it the other night. Internet kept directing me to different companies. Lori just put it on there. Let me see if try that link that she gave you. If that doesn't work, let me know. And then we can go from there. And let me know, Renee, what you need. Because if I happen to have whatever it is you're looking for, I can also mail it out to you if that works. But that's the link Lori posted there. So the other thing I want to talk about is nicks and cuts that can happen at a grooming shop. And groomers, we just nicked a dog yesterday. So I told you in the beginning of this that when clients want to come to the spa, we do an hour and a half group orientation. We take about 15 to 20 people twice a month, and we sit them in a room, and we go over all of this stuff so that they know what to prepare themselves for, and what to expect and what I need from them. And so that's what I want to share with you guys. And so one of the things I talk about, as I said, that it can be dangerous. Grooming absolutely can be dangerous to your dogs. So how does your dog get nicked or cut in a grooming shop? So there's a lot of reasons, and some can be your groomer's fault. Believe it or not, sometimes if your groomers are watching, please don't hate me and throw things at the screen. For one, it won't get me. It's just going to ruin your screen. And for two, Liz, hear me out. So sometimes it's your groomer's fault why your dog got nicked. And there's a couple reasons why it can be your groomer's fault. One can be that your groomer is not using good equipment. And when I say good equipment, I don't mean expensive equipment. I mean equipment that is in good standing. So the blades, sometimes blades are very expensive. People don't realize this, but some of these blades can be $60 for one blade. And they get broken very easily because dogs fling things around. I've had clippers fly out of my hands. I've had a dog kick the blade off that I just set there for a second. I've bumped into my table and the blade falls. No, I didn't watch all of it. I did watch some of it. So, because I love Dr. Morgan so much. But one of the reasons that your dog can get nicked and it be your groomer's fault is the equipment that they're using. So, like I said, those blades are very expensive. So sometimes my groomers know if your blade is broken, throw it away. Throw it away. If I have to replace it, I will replace it. But you cannot use broken equipment on these dogs because that's how they get cut. And so now that's going to be a little difficult for you, right? Because you can't really just know. I mean, a groomer's not going to come out and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I cut your dog. I was using a broken blade." They're not going to say that. What they're going to say is, "I'm so sorry he moved." That's what they're going to tell you, because we're all afraid of being yelled at, called names, being at fault for something. So if you're a groomer out there, I'm going to tell you this: throw your broken blades away. It's not fair to the owner, and it's definitely not fair to the dog if you're using broken blades. Now, that being said, that's really pretty. They talked against making dogs vegetarian. Yeah, I'm sure that they did, and I'm against it as well. But in a kind of a different way. I have been telling people that lately I have been giving my dogs a lot more vegetation. I'm against the vegetarian diet because most commercial vegetarian diets out there are loaded in carbohydrates. They're putting rice, potato, macaroni, you name it, in their foods. And then they're adding in supplements. And that's why I'm against a vegetarian diet for dogs. I don't like overloading supplements. I think supplements can be dangerous, as we saw in Hill's Science Diet when they overdosed dogs on vitamin D. So I don't like supplements. I don't like a ton of supplements put into my dog's food. But can I get enough protein in my dog by doing meat? And so for me personally, they talked about the famous doctor in his book. They talked about Dr. Pitcairn, you mean? Yeah. I did a talk with Dr. Pitcairn, and I just think that he's an amazing veterinarian, and I think he's great, and he makes really good points I don't disagree with. He says that in order to do a vegetarian diet, you have to do supplements. He says that outright. What he's arguing is that there's so much toxic stuff in our dog's meat and the animals. And so what the big argument that he made for me, and I researched it to death after he sent me some studies, and then I did my own research on it, is how much toxic stuff gets trapped into the fat cells of the animal versus the cells of the plants. And so if we can do a little bit more plants and a little bit less meat is where I fall. And I tend to fall that way a lot of times. I don't tend to go one way this way and a wholeheartedly one way this way. And that could be a lot to do with the fact that I was on the debate team for many, many, many years. And so I learned really quickly how to understand that both arguments can be good, and you can take kind of the middle of the ground. So what kind of blade is best? I have Shih Tzus, and I know there's ceramic and other types. I don't know which to buy when I need to replace the blades. The ceramic blades, I haven't really gotten, but I'm doing a large quantity of dogs. So I think the ceramic blades would work fine for you. But for me, I know they say they're supposed to last longer, but for none of my groomers, and we have eight of us over there grooming, I haven't really found the ceramic blades to be that great. I'm trying to think of some brands, and for the life of me, I can't think of them right now, but for just doing a Shih Tzu, it's not really so much the blade as it is the clipper. So that's kind of the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to first start out and groom their own dogs. They get a clipper that just doesn't have the power to go through their dog, and then they think it's the blade. And in fact, it's actually the clipper. So Andis makes a really good clipper that I like, but I wouldn't call it your blades problem. Most of the time it's the clipper problem. So clippers that are made for human hair are not strong enough for dog hair. So I would make sure that you are definitely getting a dog clipper. It was oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, for my own dogs, what I've been doing is my dogs they fast. 2 or 3 times a month where they don't get any food at all. They go 24 hours without any food. And then once a week, they get an all vegetarian diet, which is Andis. Andis is a really good clipper. So and then once a week they get all vegetation, but they're not getting, keep in mind, they're not getting, rice or potato or starches or carbohydrates at all. They're getting spinach and broccoli and kale and blueberries, and they get all of that kind of stuff. And then once a week, I do what is called my animal friendly diet, where, I'm a huge animal lover. So the thought, and this is where I know Dr. Picarin comes in really hard and strong, is the sustainability and how many animals have to die in order to feed our animals. And I've always said this: if I were to get my wish, and if the people that I bring to you guys, if we were all to get our wish and that all animals ate a raw diet, could we even sustain that? I mean, how much animals have to die in order to feed all of our animals? Because currently right now, most people are feeding kibble, and kibble is heavy, heavy, heavy on rice and starch and junk and pea starch and stuff. So, the Alter Edge is actually really good, Pam. I don't see why. What number blade are you using? 5, 4, 7, 10? Are you using a guard comb on top? If you can give me those answers, I can help you a little bit. Or maybe you're not having a trouble at all, but I don't buy when I need to replace the blades. Maybe you're not having a trouble at all, but sometimes it could be that if you're using a guard comb. So when we talk about the vegetarian diets, and I know that kind of got me a little off track there when I was thinking about, but so then my dogs will do what I call an animal friendly diet. And that is because of this sustainability. And I do those where what they're getting is anything that didn't kill, not anything, but they're getting protein, but not from not because an animal had to die. So I will do, what do elephant plant? I don't know what that says. Try that again. Elephant question plant. I don't know. I'll look at it again. So I will use goat's milk, eggs, goat's cheese, those kind of things, to have like kind of an animal free day where my animals aren't eating because another animal died. And so I do those every once in a while also. So my dogs get a huge variety of different foods. And I love the days when I'm doing a vegetarian day and when I'm doing a day where no animal had to die in order to feed my animal. So it makes me feel really good. Although I do absolutely believe that my animals need to have that in order to survive too. Um, so let's go back a little bit and we're going to talk about, so cutting, getting your animal cut, right? Being very careful. Like Pam, those blades, if they chip off on the side, that's what I'm talking about. So if you drop it and it chips off of the side, do not use that on your animal. That is a reason you can blame your groomer for. If she's not using the right blade, or blade that broke, that's your groomer's fault. How are you going to know that? I don't know. You just kind of maybe need to hope that the place looks like it might be a place where they're taking care of their stuff. If you walk in and it looks like everything's broken and things are falling apart, then they're probably not taking care of stuff in the back. So keep your eyes open when you walk into places. If there's hair on the floor, that doesn't mean anything, because let me just tell you, at the spa, we are so clean, and the hair in our place has hair on top of hair on top of hair. So hair on the floor is not something, but if everything's broken and falling apart, they're probably not taking good care of their stuff. So pay close attention to that. What do elephants eat in the wild? Plants, and they survive. Yeah. I mean, it's different digestive systems. So I know they're huge animals, they're different digestive systems, and how, like horses don't eat meat either. They're large, but they just have a different digestive system. And some of them start to digest in their mouth. And so they start to break down stuff all the way through, like giraffes and things. And so one of my favorite people to talk about that too is Dr. Richard Patton. And he studies the nutritional needs for all sorts of wildlife. And he's a really fun guy to talk to. He's amazing. But so making sure that when you walk into your grooming shop, you're looking at a place that looks like they would have good equipment in the back, because it's going to be really hard to walk in and be like, can I ask you a question? If you ever dropped your blade on the floor and it broke, would you throw it away or would you continue? That's not going to happen. So that is one reason why it's your groomer's fault if she's not taking care of her equipment. Another reason it could be your groomer's fault, and this is something you guys want to pay attention to. When you walk into your grooming shop, if it is crazy and the groomer is answering the phone and she's running around and she's bathing the dog and she's drying the dog and she's cleaning up and she's got to call you and it's total chaos, your dog can get injured. And to me, I blame the groomer for that. Overbooked, not hiring enough help, being crazy busy is going to increase the amount of care that happens it's going to increase the chances of your dog getting injured. So you really want to make sure that, I love places where the groomer is not answering the phones, is not bathing, is not drying, is not running around like crazy. Because if you can find those places, those are going to be places where, you might not get to talk to the groomer very much, but is that really what you need to do? Talk to the groomer, or would you rather your dog be safe with the groomer in the back? You don't want the chef also being, and I know this isn't a safety issue, but it could be, right? The chef has to go and take the order and then go to the back, and then he's so busy and he's blah, 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 and he drops your steak on the floor and he steps on an accident, but he's too busy. So he picks up the steak and he puts it on your plate and then he feeds it to you. You're probably going to get sick. So you really want to find a place where everybody has a job to do so that your animal is taken care of. So in that case, I also blame your groomer. I blame the groomer for not taking responsibility and having enough care and help to help. So that's another reason why your animal can get injured in a grooming shop that I would blame the groomer for. So why could a dog get injured and it be your fault? Not your fault, because, right, we're not going to put blame on other people, but there are some things that you need to be responsible for in order to make sure your animal doesn't get injured in a grooming shop. So one of those, and it's probably the number one reason why a dog gets injured in a grooming shop, is from matting, knots, tangles. All of those knots get underneath the arms, they get behind the ears, they get under the belly, they get wrapped around their feet. I've seen mats so bad that it causes the toe to come up like this, and the mat is all intertwined in between the toes, and the owner doesn't even know because the hair is all the way down there. And then we get them on the grooming table and I release the knot, and then that paw finally goes back into its spot, but it feels weird. So now the dog's limping, and then we're getting blamed. But is it our fault? Was it the groomer's fault? We don't have the dog living in our house every single day. Is it the owner's fault? Not necessarily, because you didn't see it. The owner didn't see it. But it can cause injury. So making sure your responsibility as a pet owner is to please make sure that your animals are not matted. It is by far the number one reason why dogs get cut in grooming shops. It's the number one reason why they get brusher burn, because the groomer, even the slightest bit. I had a dog the other day, little dachshund, and he had the largest knot behind his ear, and I probably should have shaved it out. But that's only in hindsight. It was a big mat, but it came out pretty easy. So I really just had to take a little dematting comb. And then as soon as I got it out, it was red under there. Not really sure if the dog had been scratching at it, which is what I suspect because I barely did anything to it. And so that's the other thing. And then groomers get blamed, even though the owner wouldn't even have been able to see it because I wasn't able to see it. So they have big giant mats behind their ears. Which also reminds me, if your dog has giant mats behind his ear, there's a really good probability that your dog has an ear infection because they're scratching at their ear and they cause those mats. So I always tell people, if your dog has giant mats behind his ear, we want to go in and have the vet look in with an otoscope so they can see all the way down in that canal, especially if you live in an area where there are foxtails, because they can get foxtails way down in there and your groomer won't even be able to see it. No, you won't be able to see it. Nobody will be able to see it. So it's always a good idea to get down there and look and see if there's something in there that's causing some kind of an infection or just irritation in general. So matting, you guys are responsible for matting. Now, if you want the groomer to be responsible for matting, that's fine too. I take on those dogs also, but then what that requires is what I tell my clients, that I need to see your dogs depending on them. I might have to see your dogs every 2 weeks. You can't bring me a dog that mats and you want him to have super long hair and then you bring him to me every 6 months and he's going to be matted. But if you want a long haired dog, which is great, and you want the groomer to be responsible, then you just have to bring him in more often. And then we can take care of the mats, but those are something you're responsible for. Okay. Other things that difference between a groomer being responsible and pet owners being responsible. Overweight dogs is one of my biggest pet peeves because it's not fair. It's not fair. There are no overweight animals in the wild. They don't exist. There's no such thing. We take these animals in our home and then we think that's cute to overfeed them. And, oh, but he really likes it. He's hungry. He acts like he wants it. It's instinct for animals to eat. They just eat. They'll eat and eat and eat. But they're not hunting, so they're not burning off that fat. So, but if you have an overweight dog, you're putting your dog at risk of getting injured at a grooming shop, and it's not going to be your groomer's fault. But when we're grooming dogs, we have to move them. We have to lift up a foot. We have to, grind their nails. Hopefully, if there's any groomers watching this, here's my little side note. Please stop cutting dogs' nails. Please, 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 I'm begging you to start dremeling their nails. But if you have an overweight dog and you bring him into a grooming shop and the groomer has to pick him up and move him and he doesn't like it, there is not a dog on the planet that says, excuse me, I'm going to lift my arm and could you just shave this little mat out between my, no. They're resisting us. They're pulling. And if they're overweight, they have a really high probability of getting injured. So please, please, please. And if you're not sure if your dog is overweight, you think he's fine, ask your groomer. Hopefully your groomer knows. Does he look overweight to you? Because I just want to make sure he's not. Because if he is, he's at risk of getting injured. And that's even in the car ride over. An overweight dog has a high probability of everything. An overweight dog, most people are always shocked that I talk about these, but I talk about them because they are what they are and I try to help people. But I had a bulldog come to me for years and he was so overweight. And I did keep telling the mom, please, please, but she never was able to get the weight off of him. And he had a heart attack in my shop and he died. And it shook me to my core, where I kind of never wanted to take overweight dogs ever again, because it was awful. We rushed him. We did CPR on him. We rushed him to the emergency room. And before the owner could get there, they had opened up his chest cavity because I told him to do whatever you have to save him. And when we got the report back, the vet just could not believe how much fat was just suffocating this dog. And I know it was hard on the owner because she did try to get him to lose weight, but it definitely, an overweight dog is going to be a case where that falls on the owner, not on the groomer. So other things that can happen in a grooming shop, right? Or we talked about ear infections. So anal glands. I know it's 5 o'clock, but if you guys are still in, I'm still in. So anal glands are another thing that groomers get blamed for numerous times. Always getting blamed for this. So there are two little anal glands, two little sacs inside your dog's rectum. They're little pea size. They're on each side right here. Most groomers will do what's called external expression. So they lift your dog's tail up, the rectum will protrude a little bit, and then they will go on the outside and they squeeze in, up, and out. Quick cut. My dog's quick got cut last week and started bleeding at the vet's done by the groomer. Oh, we're going to talk about that. This is it's like my biggest pet peeve right there. So what happens is, so you have external, which most groomers will do external, and then there's internal. Some groomers will do internal. I don't see a problem with it. There are some vets out there that say that groomers shouldn't do internal, like it's some kind of crazy, like surgery type thing. It's not. The pea size thing is literally like right there. It's not like they have to go all the way up in there or anything like that. But what happens is we get these dogs who have impacted anal glands. And maybe your dog was scooting a little bit. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he licked a little bit and you didn't even notice it because he just does it at night when he thinks about it and it starts bothering him. Then you bring him in for grooming. The groomer expresses it. Your dog goes home and now he's licking and scooting and chewing and biting and he's going crazy. So the groomer gets a call. I had a client one time take her dog to the emergency room for it. She wanted me to pay for it. I did, of course, because I just thought it's so hard to fight people on this and educate people. And she's a perfect example. She was so furious. She thought we did something to her dog. So she doesn't come to me anymore. And I'm like, how sad is that? Because the dog has an anal gland issue and it needs to be addressed. And now it's never going to get addressed. But so you get your dog home from the groomer and all of a sudden they're scooting all over the place, licking. They even do this thing. It's called the anal gland dance, I call it, where your dog's just walking through the living room and then they just stop and they turn real quick and they bite at themselves. That's an anal gland issue almost always. And it's not caused by your groomer. It's not caused by you. It's caused because his anal glands got impacted and she tried to help him and they got like they just feel weird, right? Because someone's been back there and they expressed him and it's awful. If that happens to your dog, put a little bit of coconut oil on it and give it a day or two. If it doesn't clear up, I would put a cone because you don't want him to be scooting and chewing and doing all that kind of stuff. So you want to put a cone so he's not making it worse. Usually that's what happens is you get him home, you put him in the house, you go jump in the shower real quick. And the whole time he's been all over the carpet and now he's got rug burn and it's worse than it ever was. And so it becomes a huge problem. My dog will scoot her bottom every morning. She's got an anal gland problem. So how do you avoid that? The best way to avoid it is to add fiber to your dog's diet. So the more bulked up the stool is, when the poop comes out, it will pass right past those two little anal glands and it should express them on their own. So if you are having that, that's what I was going to get into. So I'm glad you said that, Lily, is if you can get those to express on their own through diet, that's the best way to do it. I personally don't like groomers to just automatically do anal gland expression on your dog. So if you have a puppy and it's never been done, then ask your groomer not to do it and get him on the right diet so it protects him. So those are the three main things that groomers get blamed for. We get blamed for their ears. We get blamed for their glands. We get blamed for, I've even been blamed. I've been blamed for everything, including and up to a dog dying. And he didn't even die in my facility. So her name was Lily. So we're always getting blamed. And when that happens, the animals aren't getting taken care of. So that's why I'm kind of here to help you guys, to kind of guide you down a little bit the right road. So other things that groomers might get blamed for are limping, right? You pick your dog up from the groomer. He wasn't limping. We had this happen not too long ago and we have no idea. Literally, I had to tell the owner, I wish I had a clue. She actually carried the dog in. So I didn't want to try to pass it off as being her fault, but in my mind, because we never really had her dog down, we kind of thought maybe something happened in the car right over. And she didn't know it. She would never have been like a liar to me. She wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, I knew it happened and I was trying to blame you. She was actually really nice. But she carried the dog in, handed the dog to us. The dog went straight into the bath and then got bathed and then went straight onto the grooming table and then got dried and then went straight to the groomer and got a haircut. And then we kept her separate. I can't remember why we kept her separate, but we had her separate for some, I think maybe the owner, I don't know. And anyway, she picked up the dog and then the dog was limping. So we get blamed for that kind of stuff all the time. And sometimes your groomer may not know what's happening. Stress could bring it on. All these different things can kind of bring it down. I'm not a big fan of pumpkin. I'm just going to say it. I'm probably the only one in my group, but I'm not a big fan of pumpkin. I know a lot of people are. I just think it's a lot of carbohydrate and it's given a lot to animals. I like banana better. As far as healthy poops and coconut chips. That's one of the reasons why I give my dogs an practically all fiber, a lot of spinach, a lot of celery, a lot of, they get those fiber days where you can call it a fiber day or you can call it a vegetation day, whatever you want to call it, where that's all they're getting. And I just bulk up their poop and I don't have any anal gland problems or ear problems or anything like that. So keep in mind on that part, like I said, some groomers are responsible for things. Lily talked about her dog getting the quick and it bleeding. So we don't use nail clippers. And if I had my way in this industry, I wouldn't outlaw them or make them illegal, but I would come up with something where you could only use a nail clipper on an animal if there was no other choice. And the reason why is because the animals a masked banana. The reason why I hate nail clippers is because no matter how much, like if you don't make them bleed, it still can hurt. It makes that like that. And it still it puts pressure on that little quick in there. And you have a way higher probability of making a dog bleed with a nail clipper than you do with a Dremel. But the dogs that I've trained on how to Dremel their nails from day one, if they've only come to me. So when I get puppies, I always tell people in our orientation, new clients coming in now, I tell everybody, please don't let anybody else cut your dog's nails. Like I don't mean anybody else. I just mean don't let anybody cut the dog's nails. I don't care if you want to ask your vet to Dremel them. There's a good chance your vet's not going to Dremel them. I will tell you that much right now. They don't have time. I always tell people I can do dog's nails. I could do all my dog's nails in probably less than a minute. To Dremel my dog's nails will take me close to 20 minutes. So if you think most vets out there are going to take 20 minutes to do what people want to pay $10 for, it's never going to happen. And most vets don't even charge $10 either, which kind of always makes me upset a little bit because nail trimming is so expensive at the vet and the vet doesn't even do it usually. It's usually the tech or one of the groomers there. And if they're cutting them, it's taking them less than a minute. If that, I mean, it depends on the dog. You can get dogs that are difficult and you might need to get two people to do it. But I would highly recommend that you never, I don't know. So a masked banana, do you mean mashed? Oh, I think you mean mashed banana for fiber. Mashed or not, I don't mash them for my dog. My dog knows the crack of a banana. Both of them. If I cracked a banana right now, they would both come running to me in a heartbeat. But I give my dogs probably 1 or 2 bananas a week. Depends. Hey, Canada, my favorite. I love Canada so much. I do. Not to diss my own country, but what part of Canada? I just love Canada. Sorry, I was looking at something. So what else can you guys do to protect your animals in a grooming shop? Okay, this may be really hard for you, but sit tight. Number one, Ontario. I've been to Ontario. I just love it. But no offense, but British Columbia is my favorite. I just love British Columbia. I haven't spent that much time over. I need to go over there a little bit more. I have been to Ontario, but I need to spend more time over there. So I shouldn't judge it. But I spend a lot of time in British Columbia. So what you guys can do to protect your dogs, number one thing, and it's the easiest thing. Well, maybe it's not the easiest, but it is something that requires really no work on your part. Don't rush your groomer. I cannot tell you how much that is putting your dog at risk. So much. Bye, Lily. Don't rush your groomer. I know you dropped him off at 10 o'clock and now it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you don't know why your dog isn't ready. So you're calling and you're calling and you're calling. And even if your groomer isn't the one answering, the receptionist is answering. And then what the receptionist does is she goes in the back and she's like, Mrs. Smith is on the phone. Boy, Mrs. Smith gets blamed for everything, right? Every time we're trying to put out a last name. So if your last name is Smith, I'm sorry, it was just arbitrary. But Mrs. Smith is on the phone and she wants to know when Joey's going to be ready. And even if you're not pushing them, that puts some stress on everybody. Oh my God, Mrs. Smith's dog's not done. And I got so far behind because little Joey pooped all over me and I had to go home real quick and change my clothes. And then so-and-so had diarrhea all over the table and stepped in it and I had to rewash him. I know you think that I'm making this stuff up, but I'm not. Mrs. Johnson, sorry, I know I just called out Mrs. Johnson, said that she wants the face redone. And so I had to redo her dog. And now I'm behind there. And my water pump stopped working, or the electricity went out today, or who knows? There's so many things throughout the day. And so was late, and that caused my whole day to get behind. I don't think there's a grooming shop in the country who starts at 7 o'clock in the morning and goes all the way through exactly without a glitch. It's all day, every day in a grooming shop because animals get to choose what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, and when it's going to happen. And we just have to kind of work around them and accommodate them. Sometimes people bring in animals who on the phone, when they made the appointment, they said she wasn't matted. Now I got her on my table. We had one today that was supposed to come in just for a bath. And for my grooming shop, what we call just a bath is literally we bathe them, we blow dry them, and we brush them. And that is it. But she came in for just a bath, which should have taken me no more than probably 30 minutes. And now she was matted from head to toe. And so now we're talking about another 45 minutes of dematting this dog. And so keep in mind those things can happen, and it happens all day long, and your groomer has to be responsible for all the dogs. So don't rush your groomers. Unless you have some kind of an emergency, I promise you your groomer will call you when your dog is ready. So don't let that, oh my God, why has she been there so long? Those kind of things, because putting that rush on your groomer can cause a lot of problems. So good. Lori's dog loves bananas. Mine too. I mean, absolutely loves them. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. It's not intended to woe is us in the grooming world. It's not groomers are bad. Although groomers, come on, you guys got to raise your hand. You got to take responsibility sometimes when you're overbooking and you're getting stressed out and all of these things where animals can get injured. Other cases that I don't talk too much about, it usually scares people. It's kind of one of the number one reasons why people don't want to go to grooming shops, because you've probably heard all over the internet about all the animals that have died in grooming shops. The two main reasons, according to PETA, that animals die in grooming shops is being left in cage dryers and overheating, so they get heat stroke. The second reason that that dogs die in grooming shops is from being left on grooming tables, and they choke and try to jump off the table, which is why I don't like groomers who are running around and doing everything. I know that it's hard because groomers don't make that much money. And so if you have to hire 12 more people to help you, and that's why the grooming industry, you're not going to like this part of what I'm going to say, but that's why the grooming industry needs to raise their prices. We are taking care of your children. We need to be able to afford to have enough people there in order to take care of your children. And that, is something that sometimes people think, oh, mobile grooming, that's only one-on-one. And I like that, but nothing, not a single place that I'm talking about, whether it's my shop, a mobile groomer shop, a back of a vet hospital, none of these should you just take for granted that are okay for your animals. Because in a mobile groomer, they're always in a hurry and they only have one person there. And sometimes you need to have somebody help hold your dog, which is why you have to find out what your dog's needs are and match. If you had an old 16-year-old Cocker Spaniel, I would never use mobile grooming, because there's a good chance that it would be really helpful to have two people to help hold that dog up if he's having trouble standing, if he's got some issues. those kind of situations. If he's super wiggly, those kind of things, sometimes you can use two people. So no matter what it is, you want to match your dog's needs to the facility in which they are working. How much time can they spend on your dogs? Are there people there that can help? Does your dog need an extra person, or is he super good for grooming? A lot of groomers don't want to tell you. Some groomers feel like if they tell you that your dog was difficult, that you're going to go somewhere else, and they don't want to necessarily lose you, but so they don't tell you. So a lot of times groomers will say, "Oh my gosh, no, he was such an angel." And you're thinking to yourself, that's weird. The other groomer said he was horrible. And then what happens? Then you think that the groomer that said he was awful, even though hopefully they're not using that language, but the groomer that said he was awful, you think that it was her. She must have done something to him. And the reality is she might have just been honest with you because she wanted to make sure that you knew in case something were to happen. So you have to be really, really careful with what is being said and why it's being said and all of these kind of things, because there are different reasons. I've heard them all. I've heard groomers tell people that the dog hates the blow dryer. He hates it, and that's why he's going home wet. And then I get the dog on the table and I'm like, he didn't hate the blow dryer. Does that mean that the groomer was lying? No. It just means that he didn't hate my blow dryer, and he didn't hate how I did it. It doesn't mean that she was lying. It just means that in my shop, he didn't do that. Why? I don't know. There's all sorts of different reasons why your animals can act differently. But the last thing that I want to say, unless you guys have any questions or anything else you want to talk about, and this is to all the groomers out there. If you're listening, or if you ever listen to this, or you watch this on a replay or whatever it is, please stop blaming the groomer down the street. And the next time a client walks in and says, my dog's afraid to be groomed because the groomer down the street beat him or abused him or treated him horribly, can you just please just say, I doubt that happened. It may just be he didn't care for that environment. Some environments are different. Some environments are louder. Some environments, who knows what's going on? A different smell, a different shampoo could set him off. There's so many different reasons why my own golden retriever, I always tell people this, my own golden retriever, who I am the only person who has ever groomed her. If I even slightly mention to her that it's time for a bath, she runs and hides every single time. And she's supposed to be a water dog. So to all the groomers out there, the next time someone walks into your shop and says, my dog's scared to get groomed because they think the groomer down the street abused him, instead of going, oh yeah, we would never let that happen here. Maybe, just maybe you could say, well, they probably didn't abuse him, because we're just hurting the whole industry. Groomers care about your dogs. There's not a groomer out there that wants to injure your dog or hurt your dog or hates your dog or wants to ruin their business. So just let's all just stick together so these dogs don't have to keep going from grooming shop to grooming shop to grooming shop to grooming shop. Know this about dogs. They don't like getting a bath. They don't like getting their anal glands done. They don't like getting their ears cleaned. They don't like getting their nails done. So that's why they don't like grooming. They don't love going in and doing that kind of stuff. So it's not because your groomers are beating them or abusing them or yelling at them or screaming at them. But if your dog's coming in matted, that's another thing they don't like. No one wants to. Can you imagine someone yanking and pulling on your hair all day? It's awful. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and go. So I will see you next week. Next week is going to be with one of our veterinarians, I think. To be honest with you, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure who it is next week. Lori might be able to tell me. I know the two crazy cat ladies are coming up pretty soon. I know we have Dr. Morgan. We have Dr. Canizero coming up. So we have, I think, the next month and a half kind of filled. And in between there, when we don't, I'm going to be on here. So you guys can always reach me 4:00 on Wednesdays, Pacific Standard Time. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off, you guys. Dr. Katie Kangas next week. Yay, Dr. Kangas. So I don't think we've had her on yet. So you guys are going to get to meet Dr. Katie Kangas. She's amazing. She's fabulous. I just love her so much. She's out of San Diego, and she's a wonderful holistic veterinarian. So make sure you tune in next week, because you're going to love her. You're going to fall in love. I know you're going to fall in love, and I haven't had her on before, so you're going to be excited. So I will see you guys next Wednesday, and just keep your pets safe. And that's it. I will see you guys next Wednesday. Take care. Bye, everybody.